This book really is, what if Samantha from Sex in the City was a school teacher, but also a fascist? Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, Read Good, Draw Bad, where we love to read really good and draw pretty darn bad. Today we are reading a truly fun book because it's not about world wars, but about girl wars. And we are considering the education of young women in the classroom with the super sexy, super seemingly liberal Miss Brodie. Today we are reading the classic tale of females figuring things out in The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie by Muriel Spark. Just so you know, I'm doing a reading challenge where I'm reading the Modern Library's top 100 novels of the 20th century, and you can find more information in the description below. First, a TLDR on this book. This book was published in 1961, which makes it quite a bit more of a newer book compared to some books on this list. And this book is about to get a little freaky with us because it's kind of like if Babysitter's Club got a sexy upgrade and learned all of the ropes about how to be a real woman. Miss Jean Brodie, who is the subject and sometimes the star of this book, is a woman who is in what she believes to be the prime of her life, especially her sexual life, I guess. But there's also a central mystery to the book that's alluded to near the start, where Miss Jean Brodie talks about a girl who betrayed her while she was in her prime. And so we follow Miss Jean Brodie as she tries to figure out this mystery. And this book is not just about being sexy and cute, but also about the way a charismatic teacher can mold young women or men into something that they want. Now we are focused on 4 young women that Miss Brodie decides to mold in her image, and these girls are called the Brodie set. I guess sort of like a set of dolls or something. So we have Sandy, Monica, Jenny, and Mary. And everyone wants to be part of this Brodie set, but Miss Jean Brodie is very particular about the young girls that she lets close to her. And the subject of this book really is about education and what it means to be a grown-up, and we can read this in this very cryptic quote from what Miss Jean Brodie says. The word education comes from the root E from ex, out, and duco, I lead. It means a leading out. To me, education is a leading out of what is already there in the pupil's soul. To Miss McKay, it is putting in of something that is not there. And that is not what I call education, that's what I call intrusion, from the Latin root prefix, in meaning in, and the stem trudo, I thrust. Now, in this quote, we can find the various tension of this book, because this book is really about what does it mean for a leader, someone who's very smart and seemingly liberal, to educate young women in the world today. Now, the time period of this book is set in the 1930s, but we do sort of flashbacks and flash forwards to the present after Miss Jean Brodie has passed away after the great betrayal of one of the girls that she mentors. When the 4 girls of the Brodie set first meet Miss Jean Brodie, they notice that there are 2 men in the school system who are completely in love with her. Miss Jean Brodie is in love with the married Catholic school teacher with only one arm, and Miss Jean Brodie is also pursuing, but not seriously pursuing at the same time, their music teacher, Mr. Gordon Lowther. Now, because Miss Jean Brodie is interested and in love with Mr. Lloyd, and she eventually sort of tells the girls about her interest in this man, by extension, these young women start to become interested and fall in love with Mr. Lloyd as well, in their own kind of adolescent way. And for some reason, Miss Brodie convinces Mr. Lloyd to let the girls sit for him as an artist, and he draws and paints all of them, and it's very Titanic. It feels very much like draw me or paint me like one of your French girls. It's a very uncomfortable time in the book, but all the girls seem very invested in getting the attention of this older man. And at one point, Mr. Lloyd gets up close and personal with one of the girls, Sandy, and he kisses her, and there's some implication that they do other stuff as well. Like I said, this is very spicy Babysitter's Club stuff. Now, there's a 5th girl who later in the book, and when the girls are a little bit older, tries to join the Brodie set. And because Miss Jean Brodie has no problem saying the wildest, most crazy things you have ever heard, she encourages this girl to go help her brother fight in the Spanish War. Unfortunately, this girl gets killed on the train into Spain as part of the war. So this girl doesn't even make it into Spain to make a dent in whatever history she thought she was going to take part in. So pretty dark stuff for a book about teachers and love and romance. Now, while all this is happening, from the start of the book, we know there is a rival teacher that all of the girls know really hates Miss Jean Brodie. And this rival teacher tries again and again to get rid of Miss Jean Brodie, but has a lot of trouble because she is so popular with all of the schoolgirls. So it's hard to find a reason or a way to get rid of this teacher who all the students love. Now, I'm going to spoil it for you, the mystery of the book, so spoiler alert. Sandy is the one that betrays Miss Jean Brodie by telling the rival teacher that Miss Jean Brodie is very interested in fascism and speaks highly of various political leaders who are interested in communism and fascism. So because she was teaching alternate subjects and not following the school curriculum, as well as teaching alternative politics, which is just something you wouldn't really do as a school teacher unless you were trying to organize people politically, she loses her job during this time, and thus ends the prime of Miss Jean Brodie. Now, all the girls from this original 4 set do end up going and making their own way in the world and become quite respectable in their own rights, but once outside of the realm of the influence of Miss Jean Brodie. Sandy, who is the one who betrayed Miss Jean Brodie, actually ends up becoming a Catholic nun because she ends up falling in love with Catholicism and not with the Catholic school teacher, Mr. Lloyd. And the book ends with a discussion about the impact that Miss Jean Brodie had on Sandy and the other girls. Now on to the review. This book is fun, but also kind of dangerous. And I mean that in the sense that it's scary how deceptive the various women in this book act in terms of choosing how to follow, how to lead, and how to trick and betray each other in this book. There is a lot of betrayal in this book. Muriel Spark is an absolutely fantastic writer, and this book I think is divisive for a lot of people because some people can't read into what's happening in the book, and then other people are horrified by the various things that Miss Jean Brodie does throughout this novel. So here's the problem. Miss Jean Brodie on the surface seems like a classic liberal arts teacher, someone who's there to open up student minds and help them grow and educate themselves. It's sort of like the Dead Poets Society. That's what it's been compared to by some people, because Robin Williams follows a very similar pattern, or rather Miss Jean Brodie seems to follow a similar pattern to Robin Williams as sort of a teacher there to educate and sort of bring alive the young students' minds. Now, there are many times where it's mentioned that she mentions sort of risque subjects. So one example is how she likes Mussolini because he makes the trains run on time, which sounds like a very funny joke, but then it doesn't take into account all the other things that Mussolini did, which when you're talking to young people is kind of really important. And also we need to talk about the 5th girl of the Brodie set. And I don't even remember her name because at the time I was reading, I didn't think she was that important. And it is absolutely the fault of Miss Jean Brodie that this 5th girl died. She also manipulates her younger students of this Brodie set into having sort of affairs with the older teachers that, she is also manipulating on the side, and creates just kind of her own personal romance drama for her own benefit. Maybe just because she's literally bored, and that sort of comes up in the book that, she doesn't have anything really solid in her life, so the thing that she has in her life is young girls. And the girls in the Brodie set are not unaware of the effect that Miss Jean Brodie is having on them, and yet they can't stop themselves from agreeing to do these things that honestly would make most students very uncomfortable. And this is sort of the problem that Muriel Spark raises in this book about what to do when you have someone who's a powerful, very charismatic leader who can make you do things that you maybe don't want to do. Now, while researching about charisma and leadership, I found this really great PhD thesis by Bin Ma, and I'm going to read to you a little bit of the summary of the thesis about how charismatic leaders work in the workplace. So Bin Ma, in the PhD thesis, The Dark Side of Charismatic Leadership, writes, based on a sample of 99 leader-follower dyads recruited from a Chinese work organization, the findings suggest that the more charismatic leaders are more likely to behave in autocratic ways, and the followers of such leaders are more likely to enact pro-leader unethical behavior. And Ma goes further to say that charismatic leaders can and do take advantage of the group under them or the people working for them in ways that would be considered highly unethical, which is not very surprising. And you can see that a charismatic leader, when you put your trust in them, are very good at getting you to do things you would not otherwise do. And this is very true in the case of Miss Jean Brodie, where the girls know they're being manipulated, but because Miss Jean Brodie is so charismatic, they go along with it anyways, with one part trust in their mind and another part being sort of persuaded by someone who's very good at persuading people. And when you think about it, that's terrifying. That's not the kind of person you want teaching your children. I think this is an easy read. I think it's a darkly funny book. And I think there are times where there's things that are said that you don't realize exactly how interesting and how deep they are until you've sort of considered the book as a whole. So overall, I give this a very high rating. I think this is a very good book. The movie based on this book, The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie, stars the recently deceased Maggie Smith, who does an excellent performance as the girl's teacher. Also, it's Maggie Smith. I mean, come on. Okay, well, the bell has run on this classroom drama. Ding, ding, school's out. Next time, we will be reading the very bizarre but very funny newspaper and journalism satire in Scoop by Evelyn Waugh. Now, if you like this review, please like, share, and subscribe. I always love hearing from people, so I would love to have any comments. Did you enjoy this book, The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie by Muriel Spark? I know I sure did. Okay, well, that's all for me this week. I hope you have a wonderful week of reading ahead, and I hope you are enjoying an excellent book in the near future. That's all for me this week, so as always, stay curious, stay reading.